Welcome back, everyone. Tonight's serious. We're investigating a murder, maybe multiple. And at the end of it, we need to know, did William Shakespeare kill Christopher Marlowe? Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. That was a little bit of an intense intro, but I had the hat off because it was that serious. A little bit of a clickbait intro here, folks, but stay tuned because I think it actually is a serious consideration that perhaps the words that William Shakespeare wrote got people in trouble, and those specific people may be Christopher Marlowe, Thomas Kidd, and Ferdinando Stanley, a.k.a. Lord Strange, a.k.a. the Earl of Derby, the 4th Earl of Derby, not the 5th, not his little brother William, but him. Those three people died in 93 and 94, right at the closing of the theaters. And this essay that we're going to read tonight puts forward the idea that those theaters may not have just closed for plague reasons, as we're always given, that there may be some actual political, censorial events happening that the ramifications of which are that not just a play gets censored, but in the entire theater industry gets shut down and almost reworked and reestablished. Why would that happen? What would cause that to happen? What play was so big and such a big deal that would make that happen? I guess you folks out there, I'd be interested in your guess. Like, you know, what's happening around 1592, 3 or 4 that's just such a big deal that people are just like, we gotta do something about that. Well, folks, this may be a sequel video to one of our most popular videos out there, The Mystery of Handy, because the play is none other than Sir Thomas More. And before we get too far into the weeds, maybe we got to talk about some context here. Because last we talked, where we left off with our Thomas More discussion, is that Carol Chillington had some pretty good points to say, hey, Handy, and maybe not just Handy, but maybe the whole play, they're all being written in 1601, 2, or 3. And so what are we talking about Marlowe for? That's 7-8 years before that. Well, there's a lot of Stratfordians out there, including maybe the most famous Stratfordian YouTube commenter, Jeff Mead, aka Coriolanus. He came to me and or maybe I sought him out, I forget which way it was. But he responded to me about some of my Carol Chillington stuff, or our Carol Chillington video, and he said, yeah, I mean, that Carol Chillington thing was pretty cool. It kind of opened everybody's eyes, but after that, this whole book was put out to show her that she was wrong. And I went ahead and looked into that book, and it's including big names, Thomas Merriam, Gregory Melchiori, Stephen May, a bunch of people with names that start with M, actually, incidentally. Gregory Metz, like, I'm not joking, like, almost everybody in that.
I think we did mention it in that episode, so, yeah. Okay. I think we definitely mentioned that there was a bunch of rebuttals to her.
Yeah.
And we said that we were going to circle back to it.
I had seen maybe one of those essays, but I didn't know that they were bound together in a collective, like...
They all joined forces.
Yeah, they literally joined forces, and they're like... down with Chillington, like, which also Chillington's the coolest name ever, so like never down with Chillington. But what Chillington was saying, if you haven't watched our Handy video, go check it out real quick. The Mystery of Handy. What she says in that video is that a lot of people have said Handy, which is one of the 5 or 6 hands, as in handwriting, that we can find in the manuscript of a play called Sir Thomas More, which was never printed, so we only have it in handwritten manuscript. The hand D, which is the fifth hand in it.
Of A, B, C, D, E, essentially.
Yeah, and also hand S, which is the original one. So there's hand S, which writes most of it, and then there's A, B, C, D, E, which are the additions. Hand D, those additions aren't the most numerous, and but plot-wise, they maybe are super important, because that's when you get these grand soliloquies from characters like Sir Thomas More himself. And that's when the language that's given starts to really look like the stuff that we call Shakespeare, or even stuff that we call Lilly or Marlowe, or stuff that we call, later great successes like Marston or Webster or something like that. But like, it's this grandiose language. And so, we've spotted all these other hands that are different, like Chettle and Heywood. And so it's like, those guys may be capable of this, but it is a different handwriting. So who is it? If it's not Dekker, if it's not Chettle, if it's not Heywood, who could it possibly be? And, a lot of names have been thrown out there, but the overall consensus in the mainstream orthodox studies is that Handy is Shakespeare. Chillington came out and was the first one to give maybe a legit, possible alternative. And she said John Webster, but in order for it to be John Webster, it does need to be a little later, because he wouldn't be around, 1592, 93, 94. He'd be around 1600 whatever. And that said, like, as much as that big book rebuttal has, like, taken apart some of Chillington's stuff, the only real consensus that has come out of that and that exists at the moment, I think, is that the original Hand S stuff is written circa 1593. When the additions are is still up for debate. People say as early as 1593 as well, all the way up to 1603. That's still up for debate. But whether Hand S is as early as 1590 or as late as 1601, people sort of started to solidify it. No, this is very much set in 1593. This is about the riots that were happening with the foreign riots, which was all about Dutch immigrants and maybe others as well, but specifically Dutch immigrants coming over, partly because their nation's war-torn, which is partly war-torn because England's gone over there and said, we'll fight for you, and they're like, I don't know, and so a lot of them have come over to England, and for the most part, the general consensus of the elite parliament folk seems to be, like, we should totally let these Dutch people in. Like, that's, I don't know if it's good for money or good for business or whatever, but, like, but there is one person that seems totally set against this whole Dutch immigration thing, and he's rather hilarious about it. I wish I remember the quotes off the top of my head, but I don't, but it's Walter Raleigh. Walter Raleigh's just like, no, this is, like, guys, we worked so hard to get our stuff going, and now we got all these people who don't even speak our language, they're coming to our country, and I know this gets political and maybe too relative to now, but like I don't think he's necessarily mirroring what we would call right wingers today. Like, although maybe right wingers would love to cite him, but yeah, he's totally one that, like. But when he says it, he doesn't come out with these super bombastic, what we would consider right wing, like, no, you can't do that for, it's not this jingoistic thing. When he replies, it's usually these really subtle, sarcastic things that, like, it's just showing these people are only doing it for cynical money reasons. And so, like, everything I've ever seen from Walter Raleigh, super witty dude. Just super funny, witty, classy guy. I need to look into Raleigh. All you folks that are fans of Walter Raleigh is Shakespeare, which I don't know if that's a lot of you. I don't know if that's any of you. But I will get there at some point. And along those lines, shout out to you Florians, shout out to you Baconians. I don't want you guys to feel like we've forgotten you, because this started out as looking into group theory, and we were heavily influenced by Oxfordian stuff, but we'd been opened up to group theory by Baconian stuff, and somehow this all turned into like the Philip Sidney show. And I don't want to say it's not still the Philip Sidney show, because that show's awesome, guys. Come join. But I do want to say that this is still a group project, and I do want to come out and say that I don't think Philip Sidney is the writer of 100% of Renaissance literature, nor is he the writer of 100% of Shakespeare's literature. I don't even know that he's the most important writer in Shakespeare, if I do even fully believe that he is a writer of Shakespeare. I will qualify it that hard. So I do want you Baconians, Florians, Marlovians, Northians, Nevillians, Pembrokers, Oxfordians. Who am I forgetting? The Raleighers.
Well, I don't know. Apparently we're putting Marlovians in the grave today.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Maybe.
Spoiler alert, Brady. Maybe by the end of the show, Marlowe's not in this, but at this point in this conversation, he is still in. We have not read this fully yet. I have several times, but once we all read it fully, we'll maybe understand why I don't give too much credence to the Marlovian theory. And I don't know. Let's go ahead and go there a little bit for now. Let's go ahead and sidetrack before we get started. Like if you go onto YouTube, who are the obvious candidates that you see on YouTube?
Obviously Oxford is a big favorite right now. You'll see stuff about Bacon is probably the other big favorite. I feel like Marlowe still gets a fair good mention, definitely I feel like if you pull up a Wikipedia entry, at least, he gets mentioned here as being an influence or whatever.
Right.
But, definitely Marlowe is he's still making the rounds, I don't know if were one of the movies ever have him as a thing? No? Was there a book written about it like that, maybe?
I want to say. He's a character in Shakespeare in Love, which is, the total Stratfordian movie. Which they totally beef that with having, what's his name? Rupert Everett play Marlowe, which Rupert Everett's really good, but they get Joseph Fiennes to play Shakespeare. And I've mentioned this in another podcast, but Joseph Fiennes is like 10 years younger than Rupert Everett, and so they make it look like Marlowe's this real mentor figure, and like, no, Marlowe is 2 months older, exactly to the day, than Shakespeare. So, like, what are we talking about? Like,
yeah.
Stop, Stratfordian, stop. And I don't know if that was written into the script or not. Script was Tom Stoppard. I don't know if he's Sir Tom Stoppard or not. Maybe.
But yeah, we got Marlowe here is still getting some lip service out there.
Yeah.
Maybe if you may catch a lay person out there that would kind of mention his name if they're
Yeah. That said, like almost all the videos that you'll see on Marlowe are they recent?
And one of the reasons why I think he's popular still, that still gets mentioned, is because they're like, well, look, man, like he gets killed, and then all of a sudden Shakespeare's like on the scene, and that's what there's a narrative that I think that people like to latch on here.
There's totally a reason to like look into Marlowe. There's totally a reason to be like red flag.
Yeah.
Not saying that at all, folks. If you guys have just come to our channel, that I'm not saying that there's no connection here. But like as far as like Marlovian like theory and Marlovian backing has gone, for me the tide is totally pulled back. It is gone. The energy is not there. Your few vocal people were Ross Barber. I don't think I can even name another Marlovian that's
Bastian
recent.
Conrad.
I mean Bastian, but Bastian's not gonna stop. Bastian's not going to listen to any of us. He still won't read Philip Sidney. I've told him to read Philip Sidney for like 2 years straight at this point, and so like I don't know how seriously I want to take Bastian, because he just won't read Astrophil and Estella. And at this point, it's not just Sidney. He won't go read his Spenser. He won't go read his Lily. He won't read anything before a certain year in 80-something because Marlowe's too young. And so he's just going to ignore those facts because he wants Marlowe to swallow all of Renaissance literature. But he can't do that, and so like I don't know, his theory's kind of like null and void for me. If you're watching Bastian, which I've left you some posts recently to make you come watch. This is my issue, is that if you want to say, because all these things are so stylistically similar through parallel passages, go read your Lily, buddy. Go read your Lily. And if you want to say that's Christopher Marlowe, then that's a 19-year-old. Maybe that's possible. But that's only for his plays. Go read Lily's novels. That would be a 14-year-old Marlowe. I don't know. I don't buy it. That's silly. So, that said, let's dive into this. If we're going to talk about Sir Thomas More, we need to know who the original Hand S is. We're not going to worry too much about the editions A through E. at least not immediately. We're going to worry about hand S because that's what most of the play is. And so, for the longest time, hand S has been taken as Anthony Monday, which hand S is technically Anthony Monday. It's in Anthony Monday's handwriting. But whether or not Anthony Monday's words are the words coming from his brain or him copying somebody else's words, that's never been looked into too fully. A few people have brought it up in the past, but like nobody's looked into it too much. Thomas Merriam is right here, and this is from 2000, so this isn't too old either. Thomas Merriam's going to say, guys, like, there's a whole bunch of evidence that suggests this is not Monday. This is somebody else.
Or rather, if it is Monday, it's just that, yeah, hey, look, this literal handwriting evidence that you're attributing here is basically just scribal evidence, essentially, that he's, the reason why the handwriting, looks that way, and it, has this, because he's just copying for someone else. He's a copywriter for someone else or something.
That's literally what he does for a living, partly. And as this essay will go into, that's one of his 2 or 3 jobs, is he's a scrivener. That's what you do. You go and you copy stuff, and you put it into copy, and then you help get it put into print and that sort of thing. And honestly, he's not the only one of these playwrights that's supposed to be a scrivener. Thomas Kidd's the most famous one, which this essay goes into Thomas Kidd. And I also want to digress one more second before we dive into this. That totally touches upon an essay. I forget who it's by. It's not Michael Hayes, but it's someone like that. It's an Oxfordian that looks into the Shakespeare signatures, and maybe I've mentioned this on another podcast as well, but looks into the Shakespeare signatures and says almost all these signatures are from the 1611 and 1612 documents with the Mountjoy case. And so let's look at the signatures on the Mountjoy case records. Everybody else, their signatures are really nice, and then when you go from one document to the next document that happens weeks or months later, their signatures look exactly like they did in the first document, as they do in the second document, as they do in the third document. But if you look at Shakespeare's, it looks like crap, and it looks like somebody didn't know how to spell their name, and it looks like a totally different person that wrote it, and a totally different person that wrote it. But on those same documents, it also shows where there are just dots. And so what this essay shows is that the dots, those are women who didn't know how to write their name, and so they just made their mark by writing dots or scratches. Their names did not need to be taken down because they were women and not, landholders or not gentry, or etc., etc. But the signatures were all male names, and they were somewhat, important people, at least relative to this case. Any of the Shakespeare signatures, you can go find where there's almost like an ink blot coming off of one of the letters. That would have been Shakespeare's original dot. What the writing is the specific scrivener of the time that's documenting everything else in the document is writing down Shakespeare's name, because it's like, alright, that dude didn't know how to write, but I need to put his name down because he's one of these important witnesses. And each time it's a different scrivener, so it's in different handwriting. The essay shows that pretty much fully, provably, and so Stratford's a real man, but Stratford did also a real man that does not know how to
he cannot write.
Cannot write. It's a fact. That's a fact. Documentably a fact. And so all these people that are spotting Handy's handwriting are spotting it through a collection of different scriveners' handwritings. How fucking absurd is that? That's horrible. That said, Shakespeare's still a pen name, and so it's still technically an author that we need to identify, right? And so Shakespeare can still have written Hand D. It's just that doesn't mean it's the Stratford man Shakespeare. And so Oxford or Bacon or whoever could have written Hand D. But also maybe someone like Christopher Marlowe, maybe someone like John Webster, blah blah blah. That said, we're not too worried about Hand D. We're worried about Hand S, and Hand S may also be Shakespeare. Just Monday is copying Shakespeare's lines. And so this essay is going to say that Hand S, what we get in Hand S, is mostly Chettle and another author. That other author is up for debate, but one of the favorites is probably Shakespeare. That's only if you do not accept Monday as the author behind Hand S. And this essay is going to show us why that is. This essay is also going to get into another point that we need to start considering at large, that these writers aren't just making a living off of writing. There's not enough money to do that. And like, we can go ahead and on another video go look into the Henslow Diary and a Henslow Diary sequel. Go and count up the amount that these people are getting every time they're documented as getting paid something in the 1598 or 1597 through 1602 section. And you'll see that that's not enough to live on. And so these people have to do something else if we want to suggest that they're actually the people they are, making a living off of the stuff that they are, and these documents are what they are, which I totally am wanting to do that. I don't want to go full conspiracist and say this is all forged stuff. You folks out there that do want to go there, give me reasons to go there, and I'll go there. But for now, I want to take these documents at face value and say that, these numbers are what they are, and these people who are who they are. But like, from the numbers, you can see that it's not enough to live on. So what else are they doing? Well, this essay is going to show you that Monday and maybe others, which we know Marlowe was, were spies. They're making more money off of being spies than they are off of being writers. And if you're making more money doing something than something else, don't you think that's just a little more important? Like, I hate to be too capitalist about this, but like, especially someone like Monday, who we know is a commercial hack writer, if he's a commercial hack writer for money and he's getting paid more with some other thing, don't you think that's going to count more? That's what this essay is going to use as its basis of information to make its argument. I think it's a pretty sound reason to make that. The conclusions that it comes to are going to be kind of speculative, and it'll say as much. But let's go ahead and dive in. Okay. All right. In its original form, the anonymous play Sir Thomas More is penned in the identifiable handwriting of Anthony Munday, playwright and government agent. This has led scholars to presume Munday's compositional involvement, despite the play's favorable portraiture of Sir Thomas More, which contrasts with Munday's known political and religious Weltanschauung. This article proposes that the solution to the anomaly lies in Munday's ulterior motives in facilitating more a motive divergent from the conventional aims of public entertainment and artistic remuneration. The essential point is Munday's provision of the censor's reaction to what he had written and his immunity as an experienced agent provocateur from any attendant displeasure on the part of those responsible for public order. Okay, so let me see. I'm going to try and skip ahead a little bit.
Wait, let me know exactly what page.
Okay, yeah, we're still on page 1. You're good. First, it's favorable portraiture, and we're in the middle of the paragraph here, of Sir Thomas More, penned in the later identified handwriting of the anti-Catholic pamphleteer, government intelligencer, and literary journeyman Anthony Munday. And second, the strikings out, comments by the censor in the original folios, and the additions to the play penned in other hands are total absolute anomalies as pointed out by her. So this first anomaly has been given very little concentration. For G. Harold Metz, it is a puzzle. And once again, that's one of those authors that's in that Sir Thomas More book. For Vittorio Gabrielli and Gregorio Melchiori, it entails a basic difference of attitude, which is difficult to account for. Could Anthony Munday, in light of reliable evidence of his being violently anti-Catholic, a government informer, a priest-catching torturer's right-hand man, have written a play which very discreetly but unmistakably implies the moral superiority of Thomas More and John Fisher to the king responsible for executing them? So, let's unpack that a little bit. In the play, Sir Thomas More is executed, and as is John Fisher, I believe. Both of them are super Catholic, which is a complete no-no in Elizabethan culture, and yet they're definitely the moral heroes. They're martyrs by, they're never executed in the play, but like they're total martyrs, right? Like, we know that they get executed. They're portrayed as heroic, like
kind of like Braveheart situation or something.
Totally get executed. I'm tripping. I'm sorry. But yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, it's almost like a Braveheart thing. So it's like, why would somebody that's super anti-Scottish make Braveheart? Why would somebody that's super anti-Catholic? And so it's a good question. It doesn't necessarily mean that he didn't write it, but we need to kind of explain that. So, let's see. Received opinion believes he could and did. The basic manuscript appears to have been a fair copy by the dramatist Anthony Munday of a play that he wrote in collaboration with Chettle and perhaps another writer. I propose that the anomaly calls for a more radical explanation than has been offered by the few that have attempted one. Let me skip ahead. So, still on that same page, says W.W. Gregg, Walter Gregg, who's the big Shakespearean guy that puts together a bunch of compilations and big-time scholar, says that Gregg opines that the players could scarcely have performed the play as it stands. Had they done so, only collective insanity could account for such a proceeding in light of the penalties. So, because there's so many political no-nos, because this has been so heavily censored by Tilney, and then even the editions conceivably after Tilney didn't really fix them, like, this play, it cannot have, like, what we're reading cannot have been what got performed if it did get performed. And then later on it says, the theater and the Revels office were not adversaries. Playwrights usually tried to, and then we're on the next page. Compose matter in harmony with the censor's wishes. Tilney's notes were intended to avert difficulties which would prevent the production of such a hastily written play. It must be noted, however, that 16,500 odd words of the original play in Munday's handwriting, that of the 16,000, almost 4,000 have been marked in one form or another for deletion. So that's 20 to 25% of the play. I've chosen two discrepant views, omitting that of scholars who take a middle position. Contradictory positions serve to highlight the puzzling nature of more censorship. Met sees the play avoiding the most important subjects that were deemed inappropriate for the stage. Criticism of court personages and matters of religion. Yet the reigning queen's father is described in words spoken by Moore, penned by Munday and reminiscent of Falstaff, as sinful glutton by day and lecher by night. Not surprisingly, the passage is marked for deletion. Gabriele and Melchiori omit mentioning it in their section Tilney's hand because there is no indication who made the marking. Going further, as for matters of religion, critics stress the vague nature of the articles which Rochester Moore refused to sign. The passage in question is nevertheless marked for entire alteration. Attention has been drawn elsewhere to Margaret Roper's dream involving rood screens and images. Rood is another word for cross. Objects of religious controversy at the time, although the lines are not marked for deletion. Which, dream involving roods, like two of our most famous Anglo-Saxon poems.
The Dream of the Rood, right?
Yeah, Dream of the Rood, and even Cadman's hymn a little bit touches on that sort of dream epiphany type situation that has to do with coming to Christ and all that. Which, shout out if you like that.
But yeah, specifically the Rood stuff does kind of have homage to older pagan stuff, though, that the trappings of all the tree consciousness and sort of motifs is definitely hearkening back to old stuff. And I kind of have in that old this book by what's his name? Stephen Pollington. Yeah, that when you read the Old English version of Dream of the Rood, that there's a bunch of like specific Old English words that have like older religious connotations. So like when you kind of do a modern translation, it's just like, oh yeah, they're it reads a much more like profane level essentially. But then you're like, oh, a lot of these words actually have like a lot of cultural baggage or whatever, and that they may be straight kind of like riffs off of like older stuff essentially.
Gotcha.
So
super shout out. Let's see. Okay. So, although these lines are not marked for deletion, and as my annotation says, yeah, they still let the witch stuff through. Like, they gotta have that in their plays, Shout out to Polanski. Let's see. So going a little further in that paragraph, or the next paragraph, says the play is penned in 5 hands. Hand A is Henry Chettle. The editions are penned in 5 hands. Hand A is Henry Chettle. Hand B, possibly that of Thomas Heywood, which I don't think anybody argues that these days. Hand C is some random playhouse scribe, some no-name who should never have a name, I guess. Hand D is now generally accepted as William Shakespeare's, and I like that he said it like that. Hand E is that of Thomas Dekker. So scholars are agreed that the original of Moore and Monday's handwriting was censored by Tilney, and it is accepted that the markings of Tilney date from about 1593. Going on to the next section, says the identification of hand S as Monday's handwriting was blah 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 blah. An innovative scientific approach to Elizabethan drama for leading us out of that fog, that bog, that mist, that jungle of textual theories based on speculations. Moreover, since Monday was an established playwright, it was no longer, after 1912, tenable to regard him as a mere copyist. Let's go further. The inference of Monday's authorship, whether whole or in part, has been accepted since the early 20th century. In Honan's words, we know that Anthony Monday, a government performer fond of volatile topics, had a major hand in working up a script on Sir Thomas More, who had been martyred by the Queen's father. Melchiori and Gabrielli saw Monday's authorship as certain. The identification of Monday as responsible for providing a fair copy leaves no doubt. With the ironic exception of William B. Long, no critic has considered Monday's forethought in becoming or providing a personal channel through which Moore came to Tilney's attention. Let's pause there for a second. So everybody knows that Tilney saw it, but nobody knows why or how Tilney saw it. Miriam here is like, well, maybe it's Monday. Maybe Monday's taking this play that everybody else writing it doesn't want censored and wants to keep putting in the stuff that they want to keep putting in, and it's like, guys, stop doing this, and it goes against his whole Catholic pro-government values, and so he tells him to stop, and then at some point it's like, all right, sure, fine, let's do this, and then he lets him really do it, and then he goes and turns it into the authorities, and the authorities are like, what? You can't do this, you gotta fix all this, and he brings it back, and he's like, guys, look, they said we gotta change it, so I didn't want to force it, but I guess if they say it, we got to change it back to how I want it written. And then what do the editions do? They're like, F your changes, Monday. F the authorities, and they write what they want, and the thing never gets played, and what happens? I don't know. So let's see. It is inconceivable that a messenger of Her Majesty's Chamber, pursuant under direction of the bigoted and sadistic Richard Topcliffe, was insouciant as to the censor's predictable reaction to Sir Thomas More. Insouciant means indifferent.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's
especially under like really serious matters. Yeah. I think it's supposed to mean like
somebody
you're
who's
not taking things seriously, and
an
like
anti-Catholic spy catcher is not. Like, is going to be totally okay with this super, like, subversive pro-Catholic piece of literature. Like, okay. Oh, wrong page. Okay. Going a little further in that page, says, he was still a messenger of the chamber in 1593, the politically troublesome year of Sir Thomas More, and his future acquisitions of public positions argue strongly for his having continued in this established pattern of adding to his responsibility and respectability. The essential question is, cui bono? If it were not to his own advantage, Monday would not have involved himself with a play recognizable as his, cognizant of the fact that parts, if not the whole, were absolutely unacceptable regarding improprieties towards divinity and state. It was to his advantage to have the play submitted. What was the nature of the advantage? Well, let's see. It says, Long posits that the play was officially commissioned and encouraged to deal with the topical issue of civil disobedience. It was consequently assured to Tilney's constructive criticism to help disseminate its moral that civil disobedience, whether by ordinary Londoners, the Chancellor himself, was a capital offence. For long, the play's ideological irregularities derived from its controversial subject matter, as well as the confused haste of the collaborators endeavoring to prepare the script before the plague intervened and the theaters were closed. Well, this hypothesis fails to account for dramatic elements which treat court personages in matters of religion, contrary to Long's view of the play's theme. Opposition to the king is opposition to God. It is misleading to consider the countercurrents as mere off-flavors and oversights. That Rochester declares that in his breast there lives a soul that aims at higher things than temporary pleasing earthly kings, and a scene whose thrust is one of approval and moral courage, is not the result of artlessness or haste. Haste is my word. As Honeyman realized, and as A.W. Pollard perceived in part, it is no less than provocative, purposefully so. Also my words. There can be little doubt that Munday knew it when he penned the words. He was well acquainted with such sentiments overheard at the English College when he was in Rome in from February to May of 1579. They were seditious then, they were seditious in the 90s, when Munday drafted and or transcribed the original manuscript of Sir Thomas More. So, going a little further, is the Archbishop's chief scourge of the Martinis at the time. Munday was well aware of the letter of November 12, 1589, from the Privy Council to asking Archbishop Whitgift to join, i.e. to enjoin, the Lord Mayor of London and the Master of Revels to scrutinize all books of plays then being used by the players and to compel them to strike out improprieties towards divinity and state, to be made ever incapable of their professions. Like that last line, to be made ever incapable of their professions, means like literally blackball them. So like, yeah, this person that's in charge of the church may have power to blackball people in the theater industry? What the heck? Why does he have that kind of power? But at the same time, apparently Archbishop Whitgift is the chief scourge of the Martinis. So that is talking about the Martin Marprelate pamphlet war. Archbishop Whitgift is the one, he's the brains and money behind all the people attacking Martin Marprelate, who is himself attacking censorship. And so all these people like Thomas Nash, who theoretically would be totally anti-censorship because he gets to say whatever he wants and he totally wants to, he's writing for Archbishop Whitgift to attack people that are attacking censorship. As is Anthony Munday, as is John Lilly, as is Robert Greene, as is a lot of these university wits. They all seem to be mouthpieces of Archbishop Whitgift. And as we'll see here, a lot of those same guys all seem to work for Walsingham as spies. Is there maybe some connection here? Ha, I don't know. Yeah. Alright. Going further. Okay. On to the next page. As we remember from Francis Meres, Anthony Munday was our best plotter. Was he oblivious of this fact? He could not have been. So oblivious to the fact that this Privy Council letter was out there, and that's what would happen to people that went against censorial, intentions. So if you went against censorial intentions, your whole thing would get shut down. Could Munday have been oblivious to this fact? The person that is our best plotter,
someone you essentially got plotted against for doing that.
Yeah, no way he could be oblivious to that fact. So he totally knows that if you have this super provocative stuff, your whole thing could get shut down. So why would he turn that in unless
he wanted that to happen?
Yeah. Second, and this is down the page a little bit, he knew that He, Anthony Munday, Master of the Chamber, was exempt from the imputation of sedition consequent upon Tilney's perusal of Sir Thomas More. So if he's the one that turns it in, and he's like, hey, I don't know, you better look at this. He's the informant. He can't be, implicated in the guilt of all the rest. He gets some kind of immunity.
He's like a narc.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what the dude did for a living. Objections have been raised that the seditious sentiments relate to Moore's dramatic characters, not its author, and were therefore acceptable to the authorities. Such a view is absolutely unhistorical in its failure to appreciate the low threshold of tolerance attendant upon the insecurity of Elizabethan settlement. The Tudor claim to the throne and the Queen's own legitimacy were far from assured. Cromwell's masterminding support for Henry VIII's claim to supremacy of the Church required the backing of threatened force. The solution to the puzzle of Munday's foreknowledge of censorship probably lies in the fact that he was acting, as he had done in Rome in 79, as agent provocateur or projector to maneuver others into traps of their own creation.
I mean, we've already kind of mentioned other kind of CIA stuff before and whatnot, but I don't know, just agent provocateur, just that concept is, I don't know, still kind of relevant today if you're sort of into maybe parapolitics and all that sort of stuff.
Absolutely.
So I don't know, very interesting.
And it says a few lines later that contrary to the impression conveyed, he encouraged and even agreed with his interlocutors later to inform on those who were Her Majesty's subjects is a conjecture. It nevertheless makes better sense of Munday's character than the assumption of his truthfulness. Then later on it says the planting of libels or black propaganda was commonly practiced, and we're on the next page, by the Elizabethan Secret Service, aka Walsingham and his boys. Incriminating evidence found by a marvelous chance on the Duke of Norfolk played a decisive part in exposing the Ridolfi plot, as did uncovering Mary Queen of Scots' coded reply to the Babingtons in the plot of that name. Munday continued his duplicitous role in England. Friar Luke Kirby, who had previously given Munday money to assist his return to England, cross-examined him prior to his execution, accused him of dissembling when he was in Rome. Ralph Sherwin, another priest who had befriended him when he was away from home, was tried and executed after his return to England from Rome in 1580 on the basis of the informer's testimony. So that's at least two dudes that we know for a fact, like Munday befriended and was like, yeah, I love
kind of entrapping him or whatever, right? Yeah.
Munday had been involved in the feud between the English and Welsh factions, which split in the English-Roman College. He appears to have joined Gilbert Gifford, Salomon Aldred, Charles Sledd in promoting the national broils. Nicholl had compared his part as a stirrer to that of Richard Baines at the seminary in Rheims. Metz showed an awareness of the enigma in a perceptive footnote. And I'm skipping down. Long has suggested perhaps he was carrying out an assignment from a responsible official of Elizabeth's government, possibly transmitted to him by Richard Topcliffe, to show on the stage as vividly only the theatre can do the evils of riotous resistance to royal will as a warning and corrective to the endemic London unrest. So, sure. That's a great reading, but that's only like half right. Like, why would Topcliffe want to put subversive pro-Catholic stuff in it? Long's missing something. Sorry, continue. Let's talk about Richard Topcliffe.
Oh yeah, I think we did mention him in the Hand Diddy current event going on, the Handy video a while ago, because I do remember us making the joke about him being a priest hunter. Shout out for D&D classes that need to be made or something,
Yeah.
Kind of sounds old school, but yeah, this guy who is the practitioner of torture under Queen Elizabeth. So yeah, very jack of all trades kind of fellow.
Yeah, real sanguine kind of, salt of the earth kind of guy. That's sarcasm, folks. Richard Topcliffe was a psychopath, apparently. So let's talk about that, though. If Anthony Munday's doing stuff for Richard Topcliffe, he's not just putting on some play that's like, don't riot or you'll get in trouble. Like, yeah, that's definitely part of it, but like, what else is Richard Topcliffe and Anthony Monday trying to oust out of people? And then this is maybe the most important part so far. Monday earned more as an agent than a playwright. Boom, there it is, folks. So this guy that's supposed to be some commercial journeyman hack writer that just writes for money, if he's getting paid more for writing something else, maybe that's just a little more important. And so, like, yeah, like, I don't know. I've had multiple jobs before. The one that makes more money is more important. Any of you folks out there that have ever had multiple jobs, a side hustle. Playwriting in literary stuff seems to be a side hustle in this time and period. I know people don't want to accept that, but go add up the numbers. Like I said earlier, it's not a full living. And so because of that, you have to do other stuff, conceivably. Like, if Monday is indeed even the guy that's writing this stuff, he still has to go do other stuff. And that stuff is being a spy. And at some point, it's not like, oh, I'm a writer, but I need to make money elsewhere. What could I do? That's not how it's happening. It's that he's a spy. Let's implement him into a literary scene to control that literary scene. Like, come on, guys. Come on. Let's see. Theater companies paid in the order of £6 for a play which normally ran for 5 months. A playwright may hope to earn £12 a year. Maybe the equivalent to between $6,000 and $12,000 a year today. The government was a better paymaster. An entry in the Ecclesiastical Archives of the Canterbury Cathedral states that £10 was paid to Will Hall for services to Anthony Monday. Monday, as the Archbishop's chief pursuivant and Hall's superior, was paid more. In his will, Monday regretted the loss of his government service. And I, failing of such fortunes, amounting to £40 or £50 yearly, which heretofore maintained me in my former charge substantially. So yeah, 40 to £50, way more than 12. They're getting paid £6 a year. They gotta be, or £6 a play. They gotta be pumping out plays. And our understanding of 1593 is that that's not exactly how it worked. And partly maybe because we don't have that section of the Henslow Diary. Scholars have assumed that Monday's primary allegiance was to literature rather than duties of state. And yeah, not just Monday, guys. They say that about other people. In relaying a view that can be traced to Monday himself, Celeste Turner lent weight to its credibility. The title of her book, Anthony Monday, an Elizabethan Man of Letters, reflects Monday's self-fashioning. The assumption that literature was his first priority belies his own admission. Going further, whoever was Monday's paymaster, his earnings as an agent were more generous than those gained from the pursuit of letters. Robert Poley received £30 from Sir Thomas Heneage, Treasurer of the Chamber, for a mission to The Hague for 1 month from May 8th, 1593. If one supposes that Monday's mission in Holland, Zealand, occupied but a sixth of the period requested, his payment in 1595-96 was likely to have been the same as Poley's. Monday, next page, was one of a number of playwrights who were recruited by Walsingham in the 1580s. Phillips and Keatman have compared his importance to that of the Crown's master spy, Catholic, priest, and accuser of Marlowe, Richard Baines. So just as misleading as portraying Monday first and foremost as a man of letters, however, was Turner's failure to give consideration to the culture of projection which William Cecil, Lord Burghley, and his son, Robert Cecil, helped create, which defined Monday's modus operandi. So yeah, if he looks so obviously like a spy, he's not going to be able to do his work. And so what all these, so-called literary historians, literary critics have said, like, oh, he's just a man of letters, it's like, no, you idiots, that's what the Cecils want you to think. He's really a spy. That's it. Like, boom, done. The agent, Richard Cholmondeley, reported that Sir Robert Cecil had once given him a copy of Robert Southwell's Epistle of Comfort as a model with which to frame verse and libels in commendation of constant priests and virtuous recusants. Cholmondeley was in effect licensed by Cecil to disseminate seditious opinions with immunity. The inescapable fact is that Monday, at the very least, was in pay of Richard Topcliffe and the Elizabethan Secret Service at the time of the supposed composition of Sir Thomas More. The implications of this have yet to be fully considered by any students of the play. So, Monday, both spy and playwright, and no one has attempted to connect the two. Like, what the flying, leaping heck? Like, are y'all not trying? Like, this is why people question Shakespeare, guys. Like, everybody says they have the answers, and this stuff's not been looked into. So everybody wants to go, oh, Shakespeare's hand D, but, like, we don't even understand how Hand S wrote the play, or why Hand S wrote the play. And, like, we're getting an essay here showing you that scholars literally don't have a consensus view on that. Alright. Okay. Next paragraph. The submission of More to Tilney would enhance Monday's reputation for clandestine reliability only under the circumstance of his having copied and not composed the play. If he actually wrote the play, they're going to be like, this is too much. You've put too much of their pro stuff to try and oust them. But if he's maybe putting a little bit of that, and then he's getting other people like Shakespeare and Marlowe to put a lot of that, and go and turn it into Tilney and be like, look at what these idiots are doing. It helps them so much more. So it's possible that maybe he's still composing it, but it makes way more sense, and there's way more predictive power to him writing a little bit maybe, and letting Chettle and the other guys really ham it up, and then now he can go, ha ha ha, look at that. So, let's see. Monday could not have copied More in the absence of an ulterior motive. All that is known of Monday makes this certain.
And also, I don't know if you, there's some interesting stuff here at the bottom as well.
Yeah.
That I was seeing here, and it's fun because it's like another precedence, because it one thing would be really great if we had a historical precedence of an author or someone like, that we posit, someone like Philip Sidney, dying and then going incognito to do a bunch of writing stuff. And this is an interesting example that at least Miriam's willing to entertain here, at least within how he's viewing it. But he says, Nichol draws attention to the connection between literature and espionage in history, as with Somerset Maugham, Erskine Childers, Rudyard Kipling, Ian Fleming, and Graham Greene in the 20th century. Obviously, Ian Fleming being the author of James Bond is obviously the most...
And if you look up just a little earlier, it says 3 other playwrights were almost certainly Walsingham agents in some capacity.
Yeah, I saw that too. Yeah, and I was
Sidney.
like, it just says Sidney, and I was like, wait, what? And I looked back because I was trying to see if it actually was referencing more Sidney, but I didn't see that.
Guys, Thomas Merriam said Sidney's a playwright. If you don't think Sidney writes plays, see ya. Peace. You're wrong. Sidney's a playwright. Boom. There it is, folks. So,
we got one professor of literature on our team.
Yeah, I mean, and it's like, it's not even on our team. You haven't looked far enough. If you think Sidney doesn't like plays and doesn't write plays, I'm going to use rated G terms here, but you're a buffoon. You're an absolute buffoon, and I don't mean to be mean, but...
If we're using Sidney terms, you're a profane wit.
Yeah,
as you are reading Sidney, and you're so profane wit.
Yeah, all right. But yeah, not just Sidney. George Chapman, Matthew Royden. These are big-time names in the early 90s, late 80s. So, what the heck? What the heck's going on here? Why? And probably not just those. He didn't mention Marlowe, but Marlowe's probably the most famous that everybody says. Okay, sorry, he does mention Marlowe. Yes.
And as far as this example
Watson,
goes...
Yeah, Thomas Watson, too.
And just as far as this example goes about how he's showing, like, hey, look, there's, connection between literature and espionage, as I'm talking about literature and espionage. But it's like, we've kind of used other metaphors on that exact one. But when we talked about, like, episode 1, I was sort of likening, like, hey, look, Islamic Empire, they talked about hiring a bunch of poets and bards to flex the empire's language, and I'm just positing this is exactly what England's doing. They're hiring a bunch of dudes or getting this project underway to do empire flexing. It's not just some dude just, kind of spouting off the top of his head all woozy-doozy. And it doesn't even explain Oxford either, like I'm talking about a deliberate, conscious effort about them coalescing a lot of this stuff in that regard too. Or,
And maybe Oxford's part of it, but
but not that narrative that he had. That he's just, what do we say, that he didn't get, he hasn't been recognized by his cultural daddy or whatever.
He's just like Mozart, reincarnate in the flesh from the past, and that, we got baby Oxford, genius 8-year-old that goes to University of Oxford and gets his PhD in writing Shakespeare, and that from there on he writes it when he's 14 years old in 1582, and then from there on he just kind of touches it up until he dies of sadness, and then it's printed the next day. And I jest, guys, but seriously, the Oxfordian narrative, what little consensus narrative we get, is so singularly isolating Oxford. It's Shakespeare in isolation, and then the folks that do go beyond that are like Bob Prechter, and it just turns into, Oxford must have written anything that sounds like Shakespeare, and we start going down Bash and Conrad road. And so at some point, there probably are Oxfordians out there, and I'm not giving them enough credit. But that needs to be more and more the consensus, that this isn't just Oxford. Maybe he can be the main guy, maybe he can be the genius behind it, but this needs to be a government project, or quasi-government project, or shadow government project. So this is coming from a power structure. It is upholding the power structure. It is using all the networks and circuits and go-throughs of the power structure. This is not just some guy in his basement I'm smarter than everybody. And maybe that government project hires a guy that's like that, and he goes and writes it in his basement, but don't isolate it to his basement.
Exactly. Yes, that was a good way of turning that phrase.
Okay. So
all of that as note of Monday makes this certain, and then the view.
So let's see. If we go to page 552 real quick. Okay, yeah. In 1961, we're middle down towards the page. In 1961, Shapiro wrote that Moore was conceived as well as written wholly by Anthony Munday. And that, we already said in 1912 that they spotted Munday's handwriting. He must have written it. And so in 61, it's cemented. Munday wrote the whole thing. Okay, well, what happens in 1989? In 1990, Melchiori and Gabrielli somewhat modified this view. And they said, Munday, who was to enjoy the reputation of our best plotter, presumably plotted the play. But it was actually written in association with Chettle and younger playwrights such as Dekker. But at all events, his was the task of giving final shape to the work. In 89, John Jowett proposed that the original of Moore was a collaborative effort on the part of Munday and Henry Chettle. And so, and then further on, E.J. Honenman suggested in 90 that he did not compose the plot of Sir Thomas More. The plot must have come from someone willing to take political risks, someone drawn to independent-minded men like Sir Thomas, someone with a taste for sardonic humor and practical jokes, someone also who endowed with considerable theatrical talent. If we could identify a dramatist with these unusual characteristics and admire a self-made man, daringly independent himself, especially in his religious thinking, interested in his forbidden books, one who might wish to celebrate a Catholic martyr, knowing that this would rattle a Protestant audience, we would still wish to know why he did not choose to write the play he had plotted. This and other questions would be answered if our dramatist did not live to complete what he had barely begun, if, let us say, he died unexpectedly, May 30th, 1593. All right, folks.
Dun dun dun.
We finally got to the clickbait title. Finally. Okay. Well, if you guys aren't privy, this is all allusion to Christopher Marlowe. It's a real generalist argument, but that little quip from Honeyman, it kind of makes sense. Go think of Tamburlaine. Go think of Barabbas. Go think of any of like Edward II or I don't know, just any of Marlowe's plays. Honestly, like his main character is always some kind of outcast that nobody likes, and like whether it's the hero or the villain or both, like it's somebody that Marlowe has clearly taken a super interest in, whether he fully morally agrees with his character or not. And whoever Marlowe is, up for discussion. Shout out to you Baconians that doubt Marlowe and any other people that doubt Marlowe. I don't think Marlowe's writing Marlowe, but let's continue saying Marlowe wrote Marlowe, or whoever wrote Marlowe is Marlowe. Marlowe, super interested in these, iconoclastic figures that say, screw you to humanity. Dr. Faustus, right? Like, eventually they get theirs by the end of the play, but, like, they're ones that take a stand and, like, go the other way. And what happens to Sir Thomas More? He takes a stand, goes the other way, dies at the end. Sounds like Marlowe. Okay, interesting. All right. But how could he have written the play if he died right when it was being written? Well, if he wrote the original stuff and then somebody else copied it and then turned it in, that would mean he wrote it before that date that it's being turned in. So he could still have died by the time it's turned in. I mean, it's convenient that he died right then. Maybe coincidental. Or perhaps this isn't a coincidence. Okay. Alright. Okay, so this view requires Monday to have fleshed out the skeleton of the original plot. Does not explain his motive for completing the work on a daringly independent playwright who died like Marlowe, someone interested in forbidden books. The assumption that Monday performed his task for the customary fee, acting only as a midwife and helping deliver an inflammatory play, probably requires further thought. Okay, so Honeyman makes it's a generalist argument, but he makes a fair argument that let's consider that Marlowe is maybe one of the main brains behind this play. If we all agree that this is written in 1593, it will be written for Lord Strange's men, getting pushed through the Henslow circuit, where Henslow documents that this is Lord Strange's people on tour at this time, and that's when Shakespeare and Marlowe and Kidd would be writing, and Green would all be writing for Lord Strange's men. So, like, if we agree that this is the time, why wouldn't Marlowe be like one of the main playwrights? He's the big shot. He's the guy, right? That's all the best money making plays of that time are Marlowe plays. Shakespeare, has some successful ones, but those are still Shakespeare plays that are early enough where Marlovians and regular scholars have been like, maybe Marlowe had a hand in this. And so, why wouldn't Sir Thomas More have had a hand, or had Marlowe's hand in it? Unless it's, he just died. Well, if we're going to date this to this early, why not Marlowe? Okay, so I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit, because he's going to go into the arguments for, not just the handwriting, but why people consider Monday the author. And what he's basically going to say is, there's not much. People have tried to compare it to Monday's few plays that we do have still in print, that we know for sure Monday. And so, yeah, the downfall and death of Robert Earl Huntington. But we also know that that's collaborated by Henry Chettle. So some of the stuff that they're spotting as Monday could just be Chettle, who people have said wrote some of the original words that Hand-S copied or wrote. And so, if we're going to compare it to Robert Earl of Huntington, it should stylistically be the same, thematically be the same. And there are parts that are, but those are all conceivably Chettles, and the parts that aren't are all conceivably Mondays, and it's not that similar. It's really not. Like, and he'll do stylometric evidence where we get a little table here in a page or two that shows that. What what we do have is that, like, there's some similar spellings. There's a few lines here and there that are, similar. And it's like, all that can be answered from him copying. So, what do we have? Let's actually look at it. And so, let's skip ahead to... skip ahead several pages. We get some tables. But he's going to give us a graph on 561. And this graph isn't... Or sorry, yeah, you can go to 560 actually. Go to 560. Sorry. These graphs are over 2 pages. I wish they would have somehow figured out how to put one page. And maybe when you get the book, they're next to each other. But what we have is a stylometric similarity graph. And so we have a little cross chart on the top. We have some Shakespeare plays, and on the left we have some Shakespeare plays. And how stylistically similar they are will be closer and closer to the number 0. The farther apart they get, the bigger and bigger the number is. And so if we look at, say, the ones that we do know are actually Anthony Monday's, which are down at the bottom in the box, you'll notice those are actually the least similar to a bunch of Shakespeare plays. Well, where is Sir Thomas More in this? Where is Hand S? Hand S must be close down to Monday somewhere. Oh snap. It's not. It's about as far as it gets from Monday. And oddly enough, it's the closest to things like Macbeth, Measure for Measure, and what's TGV? TGV, that's gonna bother me.
So no, but for a quick recap of this thing, we got we're saying the plays. So whoever wrote Hand S is very similar to Shakespeare. And let's see if there's any other sort of like outliers in comparison. So for instance, Merry Wives of Windsor is approaching closer to the bottom of the
Two Gentlemen of Verona. Thank you.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. Wow, Two Gentlemen of Verona's really got a Shakespeare signature and style, I guess, comparatively. Is that what they're saying?
Interesting that we're gonna spot Hand S as stylistically similar to those, because those are all late plays. Like Measure for Measure, not necessarily, but that's not an early play. That's still like 1600s and later. Macbeth 1600s and later. Of course, if you're an Oxfordian, you may argue differently, and I know a lot of people out there like, screw stylometrics, this is all garbage anyway.
And it's saying Midsummer Night's Dream is really far apart from it too, as far as...
Yeah.
Huh.
Interesting.
Where I thought, that would be closer, I don't know, as far as more of that unique-y, Shakespeare-y vibe, but not so much of a Merry Wives of Windsor or something.
Well, and
Merry Wives of Windsor is really close to Richard II.
I mean, that may make sense, because they're both supposed to be written mid to late 90s, 95, 6 era. That may make sense. And like, there's also Huntington 4 and Huntington 3, which are not down there at the box, but that's probably Chettle. And that said, I want to point out that like, and they do have Chettle's solo thing, Hoffman, down towards the bottom, but I want to point out that like, though Monday stands out, like, Chettle doesn't. Chettle totally mixes in with Shakespeare.
Yes.
And like, that's something that I've been trying to pitch since day one. Like, go watch our previous videos. You probably heard me say it. Troilus and Cressida. That's Chettle and Decker. Like, maybe in another hand, or maybe our Webster hand, or something like that. But like, Chettle and Decker. Like, it's pretty. It's in the Henslow Diary, folks. It's there. And where is Troilus and Cressida on there? It should be on there. Oh, Tro. It's right in the middle. There you go, folks. Right in between the two Huntingtons. So, there you go. Okay, so this just kind of shows that it's as stylistically far away from Monday as it gets. Now, the counter-argument to this, and I'm paraphrasing again, the counter-argument from lots of folks is that, well, here, wait a second. If this is anybody else, you win. If this is anybody else, if we were arguing about Chettle or if we were arguing about Decker or somebody, you win, because their styles are so wholly defined that we can do this. Webster, you win. Ford, you win. But with Monday's a freaking wild card chameleon. Everything you read by Monday feels different than the next thing. And so because of that, he must have just picked that up in his Scrivener days. He must have just, from copying so many different things, he must have just got this big variety of stylistic flair. And so he can just kind of flex any kind of style. And it, for whatever reason, he picked that style. And it's completely arbitrary, and it's kind of a misunderstanding of what authors can do as human beings, in my eyes. But that's sort of the given narrative on Monday. I have a different essay. I wish I should have brought it. But it just talks about how we totally sleep on Monday because we just act like he's this literary journeyman. But, we don't give credit to the fact that the dude can do anybody's style. That's crazy. We should totally like him.
Yeah, I feel like the more cynical spy view just makes way more sense.
Totally undercuts it, right?
Yes. He's gonna do any style, or he's like, he literally does not have a style, and
exactly.
Yeah.
And so, in that sense, I think this shows pretty clearly that at least Chettle's writing most of Handest, but even Chettle, as I showed, is middle stuff like Huntington or or down towards the bottom Hoffman. Handest is at the top. It's the most Shakespeare that Shakespeare could Shakespeare. And so this is maybe saying that we had Chettle, Monday, and another writer. That's what they said, right? Well, this is saying that, yeah, we had 3 writers, but it's not Monday, Chettle, and Decker. It's Chettle, Shakespeare, and Marlowe.
Right.
And because the really, the really kind of not cool, not okay stuff as far as the censors go were these 2. But Shakespeare is still kind of a nobody. He's still able to get away with it, and anything that Shakespeare writes might just be taken as Marlowe's. He's the grand genius behind all the subversive plays. So maybe it's Marlowe writing it. Well, let's go a little further. We're almost done here, folks. Okay. Going to the bottom of or middle of 562. So we have Scott Macmillan has presented a good case for Sir Thomas More being written for Lord Strange's company in the early 1590s. His evidence is twofold. Strange's men and the Queen's men alone commanded acting troops in 83 through 94 large enough to accommodate Moore's casting requirements. So Macmillan's one of these guys that can go look at the play and say, these characters are all on at the same time, these characters are all on at the same time. This play must require 26 people to play it. And then he can go look in the record documents and say, in these years where we say this play is written, there's only two groups that have 26 people. And it's either the Queen's or Lord Strange's. Well, Shakespeare's not supposed to have written for the Queen. Other people are not supposed to have written for the Queen. The Queen's not going to have all this subversive stuff. It's got to be Strange's. And lo and behold, where are all the other subversive things coming out of? Strange's, right? So, okay, boom, Strange's. Strange's men risk producing plays dangerously close to the limits of acceptability. They risked producing plays they courted controversy and sensation more willingly than any other company of the 1580s and 90s. And that's a direct quote from Macmillan. The company engaged Kidd and Marlowe as playwrights, both of them attracted government suspicion. Kidd was tortured in 93. Marlowe was killed shortly after in suspicious circumstances, the same year in which Moore is believed to have been submitted to the Master of Revels. Strange's men did not specialize in the avoidance of offense. In 89, ordered to cease playing, they responded in very contemptuous manner and played anyhow. Some were jailed on that occasion. Leslie Hotson, who's the guy that has uncovered a bunch of stuff about Marlowe, proposed that Love's Labour's Lost identified its patron in the frequent use of roots strange and change, Lord Strange's motto was "Sans changer ma vérité." Adopting a similar line of reasoning, Honeyman stressed the correspondences between the names Ferdinando Stanley, patron of strangest men, and the play's King Ferdinand of Navarre, which Brady and I have pointed out before that you can do this with The Tempest too. The Tempest actually has the word strange more than any other Shakespeare play, and they're going to mention that actually. And The Tempest also features Ferdinand as one of your main characters.
Yeah, it's also one of the first ones in the folio. Right? Yeah.
Yet, that is a 1612 play. And then even you Oxfordians that say no to that, you don't ever put it with Lord Strange's Men. Y'all say no, that's from 1502 or something when Oxford was in your utero. I digress. But no, they put it at 1581 or 82 when some shipwreck happened back then. But it seems clear to me that this is about, The Tempest is about Lord Strange's men and that sort of era. And furthermore, I want to go ahead and throw this out because I've been doing all sorts of John Lilly stuff. Shakespeareans say that one of the big pieces of evidence that it's a 1612 play is that at the end Prospero throws down his staff and says, "I will do magic no more." And that's why they say that's Shakespeare's last solo play. After that, he just helps people out and just kind of, I'll help you with Henry VIII or, Two Noble Kinsmen, John Fletcher, but I'm not going to write those. I'm done. I retired because I wrote The Tempest. It's my last stand. And for me, now that I've read Lilly, and Lilly, who's supposed to just retire out of nowhere on the spot circa 1590, 1591, 1592, right in the height of the Lord Strange's Men,
during this exact time period too, right?
And right after he's done being part of, St. Paul's Boys, which he's only supposed to have written for St. Paul's Boys, St. Paul's Chapel, and that's all he does. But it's right then that he's not writing for St. Paul's Boys, and literally, Lilly's last play is 90 or 91. Shakespeare's first play is 90 or 91. To heck with the Marlowe continuum. Why aren't we talking about the Lilly continuum? But if Lilly is a real person, or someone is a person that's trying to retire that pen name, wouldn't Prospero throwing down the staff make way more sense? And wouldn't it add up with all the Lord Strange stuff? And wouldn't it sort of explain why it's not the greatest of Shakespeare's plays?
And didn't you already find the exact same sort of exposition dump passages between father figure and the daughter figure, where he's explaining about why they have their comeuppance coming soon and yada yada? And
yeah, guys, go read the opening of Galatea. It's the same opening as The Tempest.
Yeah,
same character dynamic setup. And so yeah, that's just my little 2 cents. Nothing to do with Thomas Merriam here, but he will mention right here that. Let's see. We're going on the wrong page. What page was that? 563, thank you. Okay. The original of Sir Thomas More has nearly 4 times the average frequency of the occurrence of the root strange, largely in the word stranger, that occurs in Marlowe or Shakespeare's plays as a body. 204 per 100,000 in comparison with 47 per 100,000. The 3 pages of edition 2 in Hand D contain 8 occurrences in 1,209 words, or 662 per 100,000 words. This unusually high repetition of stranger and strange seems defiant of the censor's reduction of stranger by 14 occurrences in the original. So, the original was get this word stranger out. You're using it too much. And how'd they respond? They're like, put stranger every other word. Right? And at some point, would you that's not just about the word strange and stranger as itself. At some point, that's this point of pride. No, we're putting Strange's name on this thing. I know you hate Strange. Screw it, we're doing it. That's who we are. If you want to sort of actually buy into these dramatic companies as artistic, coalitions, there's a
just super interesting. Yeah, this Ferdinando Stanley guy. It's we always kind of mention him in Lord Strange, but yeah. It's always definitely hovering around in the periphery over here.
And so,
and there's of Shakespeare's plays, The Tempest at 181 per 100,000 stands out from the expected distribution of Marlowe and Shakespeare plays.
I wonder why.
Yeah.
time for that. Monday's John Kent and John Cumber is below the overall Marlowe and Shakespeare average. It's impossible to say that Sir Thomas More's high incidence is a marker of the company for which it was written. What can be said, however, is that the Handy edition continues and reinforces a tendency to use Strange in the original manuscript. This raises doubts whether the author of Handy had no more than a superficial knowledge of that original. Let's see. Though Protestant, Ferdinando Stanley, Lord Strange, and later to become Earl of Derby, was regarded by Catholics as a potential leader and was hence seen to be dangerous by the government, as Henry VII's great-grandson by his mother, Margaret Clifford, Ferdinando had an appreciable claim to the throne. Yeah, he was like 4th or 5th in line. He could have literally, like, when Elizabeth died, if he was still alive, to heck with King James, King Ferdinando. Like, that could have happened. Let's see. If not positively unorthodox, his personal beliefs were heterodox at least. He was not easily influenced. As the grandest northern lord, upon inheriting the earldom of Derby, he was a loose cannon on the deck of the Elizabethan ship of the state. He was tarred by association with his cousin, Sir William Stanley, not his brother William Stanley, who voluntarily surrendered Devonshire to the Spanish in 1587. In 1591, John Cecil, John Fixer, and 4 other priests were captured when landing in England. They admitted they had been instructed by Robert Parsons to seek entrance with my Lord Strange to cause Catholics to cast their eyes upon him. Topcliffe declared in 1592 that all the Stanleys of England were traitors. There we go. That's about as direct as it gets. Richard Topcliffe, who is one of the paymasters and bosses of Anthony Munday, and the year before this play is written, says that Ferdinando Stanley, the guy that's running a lot of these plays, is one of the worst traitors in England. Maybe that's enough. Like, why wouldn't Munday want to, from there on out, do whatever he could to oust Strange? And maybe this play is just enough. Okay. On the very day that the 4th Earl, his father, died, which was September 25th, 1593, Ferdinando received a letter from Richard Hesketh inviting him to become a figurehead candidate for the Catholics overseas as Elizabeth's successor. Suspecting a government plant, the new Earl delivered Hesketh over to be executed in November. Sorry, I lost my page. How did I do that? Okay, sorry. The untimely demise, less than a year later, of Stanley himself was indeed strange. Dun-dun-dun. Although pronounced in good health at the beginning of April 1594, he fell ill on the 4th of April and died on the 16th of April, less than 2 weeks later, at the age of 35. Brady and I aren't quite there, but we're almost there. It's too early to die, man. Shout out to Philip Sidney, Like, that's too early, man. And maybe it literally is too early and he's still alive. I don't think this essay's going to go there, and we're not either, but let's keep reading. A modern analysis of his symptoms has led to independent diagnoses by 2 physicians of arsenic poisoning. Dude was murdered. At least, so the narrative goes, because it's not like 2 physicians these days have access to his body. They're just taking the accounts and saying every one of those symptoms sounds like arsenic poisoning pretty basically. Like, yeah, maybe Renaissance doctors, their iteration of a coroner could totally get around that because they didn't have proper medicine and science, but nowadays any coroner that's not absolutely 110% corrupt would, dude, that's arsenic poisoning. Poisoning and witchcraft were suspected by Sir George Carey, husband of the sister of Sir Ferdinando's widow, Countess Alice, who is supposed to be a cousin of Edmund Spenser. That's Alice Spencer, by the way. Sir George shortly after became patron of Shakespeare's theatre company on the death of his father, Henry Carey, Lord Hunson. Possible beneficiaries of Ferdinando's early death were the Queen, who professed on learning of his death that he was the most honourable, worthiest, and absolutely honest man that she'd ever in her life known, and more notably William Cecil, Lord Burleigh. Had Ferdinando succeeded to the throne when the Queen died, Burleigh's political arrangements would have been jeopardized by Derby's Catholic supporters. And, I want to go down that rabbit hole for a second.
We love our rabbit holes here.
So, let us remember. Okay, who's Cecil's daughter married to?
Anne Cecil.
Yeah, who's she married to?
Is she married to DeVere?
Yeah,
okay.
So that's DeVere, and they have a daughter, and so that would be Cecil's granddaughter. And we've had a video about this before, The Friend or Foe of DeVere, where we talk all about Venus and Adonis, and that's supposed to either be DeVere writing to Henry Wriothesley to say, you should totally marry my daughter, or it's okay if you didn't marry my daughter, I still love you, or something like that. Or it's somebody else saying, Henry Wriothesley,
don't marry.
You were totally right not to marry her daughter, and like excellent work because you would have been totally screwed. Either way, like a lot of Oxfordian commenters came in and said, "Look, it's not even DeVere that's in charge of the marriage; it's William Cecil." And so, his daughter Elizabeth Vere, she doesn't get married to Wriothesley, and so the guy that Shakespeare sonnets to is supposed to be written to him because DeVere, loves the guy and he wants him to marry his daughter and all that. But like, fact is, he didn't marry.
So yeah, big old famous poem. Look at all this stuff.
Yeah.
I guess it didn't work.
Who did she marry?
It doesn't bother actually commiserate what it's supposed to.
Right. Who did Elizabeth Vere actually marry?
I forget.
William Stanley, Ferdinando's little brother.
Okay.
And it's only once William is Earl. And William's only Earl once his brother dies. And, yeah. And, like, I think a lot of Oxfordians have unearthed some info that totally pushes towards this, but they haven't made that reading.
Guys.
Reasons. Yeah. And so, I've independently, and of all plays, I don't know why it's in there, but while reading The Malcontents, I read all sorts of stuff that pointed me towards this idea that Oxford and William Stanley are sort of in cahoots with Cecil to screw over Ferdinando. There's a lot of symbolism and names in The Malcontent. We can do a video or a live stream of that at some point, but just for instance, there's this one character, I forget his name, he's totally blustery old fool, but he's continually called an ox and an ass. Which, okay, maybe that's not a reference to Oxford. But then, at one moment, he says something, and our main character, Malevole, who's totally a smartass, says, you're a regular Castiglione. And that may just be a commonplace reference, because Castiglione's the courtier is very popular for all these courtier types.
That Oxfordians like to point to.
But that's Oxford's first time in print is writing the dedication to the translation of Castiglione's the courtier. So maybe that is a nod and a wink. And there's other stuff too.
But it's funny that Oxfordians would love to see that stuff anywhere else if it was in Shakespeare or something. But if we were kind of seeing it here in this way, it's like, oh no, well, maybe guys, but you're saying the exact same criteria, Phil, as if we found it in Shakespeare somewhere. If it was some character called a golden ass, golden ox, or whatever, yada yada. Definitely Oxford. That means he wrote it.
All right, start counting for 17. Let's go, guys. Yeah. We got the go ahead. Marston, no, don't start counting. Don't look for T's.
Yeah,
no 40s, nothing. But
this is SAQ comedy, related only.
SAQ SNL.
Yeah, there you go.
But at some point, I was only able to make that reading of The Malcontent because I read an essay by none other than Patrick Buckridge on John Marston.
Shout out.
Patrick Buckridge is the same one that wrote the essay about Venus and Adonis in the DeVere Friend or Foe video.
Mm-hmm.
His essay about Marston isn't supposed to be an anti-Oxfordian reading, but his essay on Marston does talk all about how Marston probably comes up through the Stanleys, because he is a page and maybe a distant relative of Ferdinando's wife, Alice Spencer, which sounds familiar to our Edmund Spencer kind of stuff. Marston comes up through that Spencer household, and from that, he's tied into the Stanleys. And so, if Marston's writing all after Ferdinando's dead, how cool is he going to be with William Stanley? Seriously, is he going to love William Stanley? No, his position in life would be better if Ferdinando was still alive and maybe king or earl or something, because he could, you know. So even if Ferdinando's not alive still and somehow faked his death, even if he's for sure dead, murdered, poisoned, sick, whatever, I still think that Marston's gonna sort of like align with Ferdinando and not with William. And sure enough, like, there are other readings in it, not just pot shots at Oxford, but like
maybe malcontent with the situation.
The guy that takes the spot of Malevole, who's the main character. He's supposed to be the actual Duke, and he gets ousted and banished, and people think he's dead, but he comes back in disguise. And while he's in disguise, he's trying to get his back over Pietro Giacomo. And it's like, Pietro Giacomo? What is that a reference to?
Pietro, so Peter.
Pietro's like stone.
Peter.
And so like, Peter, which means stone, but Stanley is itself another word for stone.
Oh, okay.
Stanley literally means stone Lee, or stone meadow,
right.
or stone river.
Okay.
And so, Pietro, I got the stand there. Giacomo, what does Giacomo mean? Giacomo's from the Latin for Jacob. The name Jacob literally means leg puller. Well, what's a leg puller? Somebody who is trying to pull you down to get over you. So it's literally a usurper.
Okay.
And so Pietro Giacomo, and maybe that's just his character, so maybe that's just in there, but why the stone part?
Usurper Stanley or something, right? I guess
I've seen references to William Stanley is both a leg biter and a leg puller. And so it's like, all right, here, wait a second, folks, and I need to go source those and cite those before you take me at face value. But there's other readings in the Malcontent that just read all sorts, like shout outs to what happened in 1594, and I don't know why, I don't know how, and the Oxford readings go further than just the Castiglione. Like, Pietro Giacomo is supposed to be, like, none of this is set in Florence, but Pietro Giacomo is coming out of this, like, political Florence faction, almost like in the movie, or the show Fargo, where it's never in Fargo, but this is all coming because some evil dudes from Fargo came into town. Like, Pietro Giacomo is out of Florence, and he's from this Florentine faction. Well, Oxford's known for being the biggest fan ever of Tuscany and Florence. And so it's like, alright guys, like, and furthermore, it's all about how Pietro Giacomo made a deal with the head dude of Florence to like align and get with his daughter so that he could get power. And it's like, alright, well,
dude, I love this Patrick Buckridge stuff, man. Yeah, a lot of these readings with the Hatton and all that other stuff in the Friend or Foe video.
And once again, like, Buckridge, I don't think makes these exact readings into the Malcontent. It's just what he was saying about Marston allowed me to make those readings.
Yeah.
And, like, also just him sort of giving me, like, free reign to, like, you can make Oxfordian readings if you want. That's fine. But they can also be anti-Oxfordian readings. Like, this is a reference to Oxford, but it's a shot or an assault at Oxford.
Right.
And then, so, like, as soon as I saw Oxford and Ass, okay, I keyed in, and then I just started seeing all this other stuff. It's like, what is happening?
Super interesting.
But yeah, sorry, that was a little bit of a rabbit hole, but I want to go down it. Won't go too much further here, but let's talk about the death of Ferdinando. Okay, so we're on 564. Once Stanley, or Ferdinando, had departed the political scene, Lord Burleigh set about attaching the semi-independent Derby fiefdom to his own. This was achieved by wedding his granddaughter, Elizabeth de Vere, to Ferdinando's brother and heir, William Stanley. The couple were married in the Queen's presence in 1595, by which time no heir had been born to Ferdinando's widow. At a stroke, William was confirmed the 6th Earl of Derby and ally of the Cecils. In the wilderness of mirrors which constitutes the world of Elizabethan conspiracy and counterintelligence, the probable murder of Ferdinando Stanley can be glimpsed from various angles. Many have regarded the murder as an act of Catholic revenge for Ferdinando's betrayal of Hesketh in September 1593. One theory posits Strange's recruitment as an agent by Burleigh in 91. A letter from Ferdinando to Burleigh on March 94 requesting a meeting to discuss his foreknowledge of a new plot, presumably on the lines of the Hesketh plot, and reply Burleigh asked Stanley to come before the council on April 9th. as Ferdinando's kidneys failed following a gastric attack in Lancashire on the 4th, it could be inferred that Burleigh knew nothing of his condition or whereabouts. If Burleigh did know the time and place of the assumed poisoning, a public invitation for the victim to attend a meeting on the 9th would suggest precisely the opposite. But Burleigh was quite capable of such cunning. Furthermore, Sir Roland York is reported to have said to Sir William Stanley, the cousin, in 1594, "It is no marvel when Machiavellian policies govern England. I dare pawn my life that the Lord Treasurer, William Cecil, Lord Burleigh, caused him to be poisoned, that he, Ferdinando Stanley, being dead, he, Lord Burleigh, might marry the young Lady Vere unto the brother of the said Earl of Derby." As in fact, this transpired in January of the following year, York's analysis would appear pretty close to the truth. So, yeah, some guy from the actual time was like, let's think back not too long ago, Epstein didn't kill himself, right? Like, regardless of what you actually believe, like, the narrative of the time was that, like, no way this dude killed himself. And, like, I almost want to say that if you got your time machine to 1594, summer of 1594, May of 1594, everybody's going around, like, whispering, like, yeah, no way he died of sickness.
Just like so with like Stanley dying and there's a culmination with some of the stuff being censored with the Sir Thomas More play, but if he is involved with the playwriting, maybe in some regard, at least his company is, were they already in a hot spot essentially leading up to that point? And how much is that is actually involved with it, rather than just, oh, Stanley's just being a jerk, or I'm just quotes, or he's pissing off Catholics in his personal life, and is that what's really causing it, or is it the stuff in the plays, or what interplay between all that?
It's that Elizabeth is worried that he is going to politically maneuver to take over the vocal extreme minority of Catholic contingents, right? Once again, not to get too political, but like, maybe something of the effect of like what Democrats feel like Trump has done with, a certain sector of the right wing, right?
Mm-hmm.
That he's just totally become a demagogue for a vocal minority, but through that, very violent, extreme vocal minority, his sort of wielded power and, sort of usurped and taken over, not to get too political. I don't know if I won't go into that. But that said, like, I think that's what, at least that's what Miriam is suggesting about Elizabeth and Cecil, and it does seem that is the case. That, as Richard Topcliffe said in 92, like, all the Stanleys are traitors to the country and crown or whatever, because they have been historically crypto-Catholics or Catholics. And so he's worried, okay, this Lord Strange guy, super smart dude, does whatever he wants, super iconoclastic. Like, he may not actually be a Catholic believer himself, but if he's
still wielding that Catholic identity.
Yeah, if he wants to, he can go pull it up in a second and turn for whatever his purpose is against us for, and it's like, it almost sounds like it's like Strange is too smart. He's like dangerous not because of what he believes, but just what he could possibly do if he wanted. And they know that he's been historically alienated, so they know he's going to naturally be hostile, and that his position as possibly taking over as the king, like, naturally also puts him at odds. So he's just this natural, like, all right, don't trust him, like, keep him at arm's length sort of thing. That said, like, I don't know, like, why would he get to be in charge of, like, maybe the most prominent theater troupe of the time? Like, that seems a little weird.
Right.
But maybe it's so prominent because he has this sort of singular iconoclastic vision. It's like, we're going to say what we want. This isn't just about theater to the masses. This is about real art. Or, maybe that's some modern version, paraphrasing of the feeling. But it seems to sort of be what this essay is getting at. But what it's sort of pointing to is that it's both a political thing, like, regardless of the plays, like, Lord Strange is already in hot water and constantly, like, in a hot seat. But then on top of it, if we look at the plays, like, yeah, his company had been, contemptuous of censorship and went ahead with something anyway and pissed off the censors. And as the essay showed earlier and will show later, that like when censors get really pissed, they don't just tell you to stop doing something or throw you in jail. Like, they will do that, but like if there's something so bad, they'll shut down the entire company. Or if it's really bad and it's like a problem because other people maybe are starting to do it or want to start doing it, or like we just got to cut it, they'll shut down the entire industry. And there's precedent for that. And so he's saying maybe 93 isn't so much about the play. Maybe 93 is because this play was about to come out or had shown even once, and they're like, nope, nip it in the bud, shut it down. Monday had already turned it in. They were waiting for them to try and do it. They did it. They shouldn't have done it. They did it against their will, shut down everything. And in fact, go ahead and get rid of some of these guys. They're putting out ideas that are a little too much because we can't trust them as government agents anymore. That said, that reading may go against a deeper reading that you and I want to go to, that like how or why would Marlowe or any of these crowd like be subverting this spy network that they're so entrenched in.
Right, yeah.
And so like that's where I don't necessarily buy it, but maybe that's why it's not Marlowe and we have a pen name. They're using Marlowe as a pen name and he got scapegoated. And like it's because what is being put out is purposefully being put out, but it's so top secret because it's so purposefully subversive that even sort of the censorial crowd that's in charge of it isn't even aware of that, right? And so they want to say, like, Marlowe for sure wrote this, but, like, no, it's really DeVere, Bacon, or Sidney or something writing it, and they're using Marlowe as a scapegoat. Maybe the Queen or Cecil or somebody's aware of it, but, like, the lesser people aren't, so the Cecil and Queen have to act like, oh, we're not aware, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
All that's maybe part of the project anyway.
Right.
And that's maybe why Marlowe didn't get killed, and Marlowe still is alive and went to Italy, but he didn't write a darn lick of Shakespeare, or maybe even Marlowe himself.
Yeah, right.
And so, to me, that makes way, way more sense, but, Thomas Merriam can't go all the way that far. Like, that's where we have to do our legwork, and aren't going to do it here maybe tonight, but that's where this is going. That's what this is about. That we have Anthony Monday, who is known more as a spy, who is paid more as a spy, who enjoys work more as a spy than a literary man, writing down a whole play in his handwriting, which this is a fact I skipped over, but the other stuff that we have in his handwriting, it's something like, and I'm making these numbers up, but something like 20 words a line. Hand S is like 40 words a line. Well, it's easier to get more words a line if you're copying it, not thinking it from your dome, right? And so that's another really good argument. But yeah, all this is in his handwriting, but it's super provocative, it's super subversive, and whether or not he wrote it or copied it, we need to explain why, because all the explanations thus far are super, like, almost ridiculously laughable. Like, oh, he doesn't like Catholics, so he's showing a Catholic die, and it's like, dude, like, that's 6th grade English class. Like, we've gotten past basic plot structure and basic character dynamics. You got to read a little deeper, and you read a little deeper. Moore is totally a martyr hero, so why would Monday do that? And it's like, some point, maybe Monday did write the original plot, and that's why he is the best plotter, because with his plots, he plotted against his co-writers.
Yes, it was a big, giant, tongue-in-cheek sort of, extra reading into mirrors in that sense,
And, in that sense, like, Monday's probably aware that these people aren't writing it. These people are aware that they're not writing it. They're all on the inside job, but he has to act like they are writing it to make this whole expose scheme work and look good to the right people. They're all following according to the script. But maybe that's a little too far of a reading for folks. That said, if Shakespeare is a separate entity from Munday or Marlowe or Chettle, and there is a singular person that's writing as the Shakespeare writer and writing Hand D and penning parts of Hand S, like, that person did not die. That person totally got to go on to have the biggest career ever. And, arguably same with Chettle. But Chettle's not the one writing Moore's big speeches. That's Shakespeare. So Shakespeare more than anybody is writing the stuff, at least according to our understanding, Shakespeare more than anybody is writing the stuff that's getting Marlowe, Kidd, and Strange killed. And so, like, at some point, our clickbait title is kind of what this essay's trying to say, that Hand S, which is probably Shakespeare and others, but especially the words of Shakespeare, are the super inflammatory things that are needing to be censored, don't fully get censored, they get put on anyway, and because of that, there's a big backlash that shuts down the theater, and it plays just super nicely into a bunch of state espionage plots anyway to get rid of potential Catholic dissidents.
Right.
And here's the thing, it's like, I want to put out that Ferdinando Stanley can still be in on that, right? That Ferdinando Stanley is doing this in behest with Cecil and all his buddies. One, so he doesn't have to keep having this potential target on his back. Two, he wants to go live this Phoenix Nest lifestyle where he gets to just quit being an important person and go be a literary genius with Philip Sidney and Anthony Bacon and Edward de Vere and Francis Bacon and all these other people that fake their deaths. And that he just gets to go keep writing and keep doing the play thing behind the curtains. But at the same time, totally ousting all these potential Catholics, scaring off a bunch of potential dissidents, showing that this is what happens when you try and buck the system. His brother agrees to it because his brother's a freaking dunce half-wit, and which William Stanley has literally been described as a dunce by contemporaries. And so that's why Oxfordians will literally like, William Stanley couldn't have been Shakespeare, he was called a dunce. It's like, I don't know if that's a legit argument, but touche, like, Shakespeare should never be called a dunce. Like, just shouldn't happen. But yeah, William Stanley gets to go on, he gets to go be the Earl. He's not heir to the throne. He doesn't, for whatever reason, somehow Ferdinando was, but not William. And so even when Ferdinando dies, William doesn't get to move up to the throne, and it seems all just kind of this agreed
Very
stuff.
Very convenient,
behind
exactly.
doors contract.
Yeah, for people like the Queen and Cecil or whatever,
Yep.
right? Interesting.
Yep. And so that's where this is all headed, folks. This is what this is about. And I guess regardless of where you stand on Marlowe or Shakespeare and who's behind them, and regardless of where you stand on Sir Thomas More, I think more than anything, this essay is kind of getting at, we don't really understand what's happened in 1593, 1594. And sure enough, we probably don't understand much what's happening before or after that either. And so this scene, we just need to keep looking further and further into it. Keep diving farther and farther. And that's what Brady and I have been trying to do. I know a lot of you guys are doing that too. Thanks for doing that. Keep chiming in with any kind of info you have. Tell us how Bacon relates to this, or Florio relates to this, or Oxford relates to this. Let us know if this maybe changes how you feel about Hand D at all, or just should Sir Thomas More be considered Shakespeare? Is Marlowe is a potential candidate for Hand S or Hand D? Is that at all provocative to people? Yeah, I don't know. Sound off in the comment board. That said, I think we can wrap it up here, dude. Any lingering thoughts?
Not so much lingering thoughts, but we're talking about Christopher Marlowe a lot, and we've already, the last video or 2 videos ago, we talked about the red herrings and homages to a lot of detective stuff in our videos, and we specifically referred to Raymond Chandler's Philip Marlowe in a lot of that sense. So it's just fun tying a lot of these things together. And we're on the murder scene here trying to deduce it, and so we're smoking our pipes or our cigarettes, with the folds from the screens of the office doors or whatever, and just burner. You
got the saxophone noir music in the back, and
Monday. Says he's a playwright, but he's only making £12 a year.
Don't make any sense.
Yeah, it doesn't add up.
Don't add up. Yeah. And I don't know. Maybe let's. We mentioned it earlier, but let's go ahead and go there. Like, is the Marlovian theory dead? Like, I know there's still some folks bashing Ross Barber. I know, like you said, a lot of folks hear about the Shakespeare authorship question through Marlovian kind of stuff, and it's interesting, and I think a lot of people want to latch onto it just because it's like, wait, there's another guy like Shakespeare? And as soon as you hear that guy was right before Shakespeare, died like the moment that Shakespeare's name pops on the scene.
Yeah.
And and then a lot of Marlovians have gone and done like the continuum work to show that there's a lot of stuff in Marlowe that's in Shakespeare, and that if you do some stylometric graphs, maybe not perfectly exactly, but you can find trends that show that, like, it's not that they're two different writers on two different parts of the graph. It's that, like, if you go from Marlowe's earlier stuff to Shakespeare's latest stuff, there's kind of a continuum. I think there's reasons to maybe call that continuum into doubt or show that it's not a perfect continuum. Stuff like Jew of Malta stands out. Jew of Malta is like more Shakespearean than a lot of early Shakespeare plays in stylometric analysis. And I would just like to say that that's probably because Marlowe's not one of the writers that we attribute to Marlowe is maybe Marlowe, maybe it's somebody else, but one of the ones that's in Marlowe that we don't necessarily always attribute, but we sometimes attribute, is Thomas Nash. Some people, pretty much everybody says he wrote Dido with Marlowe. A lot of people say that he co-wrote Faustus, but for me, Nash seems more obvious in Jew of Malta than any of them, and so it's like it's Nash without the Marlowe writer, or if we want to go early enough and say that this is Chettle Decker, aka Nash and Green, or something like that, then yeah, it's all the Nash and none of the Green. That said, there's maybe other stuff to maybe call those strict categorizations into question itself, but at this point, I don't think Marlowe gives a holistic answer. Marlowe maybe gives us an answer right in that little period, but if Marlowe does fake his death, like, through what means is he doing that, and at whose behest? Because he can't do that independently. And if he is, like, what means is he staying undercover with? Where is he writing from? Where is he getting all the sources? What are his influences? And you go down those roads, and it opens it up to where it's like, oh, I don't really need to key in on Marlowe. Like, as soon as I go to his influences, I realize that, yeah, Nash, who's supposed to be younger than him, is supremely influencing him. Green's supremely influencing him. Lily. But more than anybody, it seems to me that Philip Sidney's influencing him. And, like, as soon as we get to those earlier names, like, well, if we're saying that Marlowe's just an earlier name of Shakespeare and that it looks just like Shakespeare and we can put it on, well, can't we do that to Marlowe? And yeah, sure enough, you kind of can. Now, the big argument against it is that, Marlowe jumps on the scene and invents blank verse. But even Marlowe isn't using blank verse in Dido. He doesn't use it fully, at least, till Tamburlaine, and that's not supposed to be his first play. And the dating on that's not totally set. And all these plays, by the way, when they're printed, do not have Marlowe's name on it until after Marlowe is dead. Almost like Shakespeare. In fact, even Shakespeare had stuff printed in his lifetime with his name on it. Marlowe never did. That never happened. So, like, I don't know. For me, if you first dive into this, Marlowe's super interesting, super provocative. But as soon as you go any wider, and you start, looking at stuff like the Henslow Diary, start looking at stuff like the Sonnets, start looking at, the earlier '80s guys, Marlowe doesn't really answer everything. And in order to make it answer everything, you have to go full Bastian Conrad, where it's just like, he wrote everything. But even Bastian can't, and Bastian, if you can, let me know, but you can't answer who's writing Euphues, who's writing the Fairy Queen, who's writing the Arcadia. I don't know if I'm necessarily pivoting to say, Philip Sidney wrote all three. It's possible, totally possible, but like, at least that makes more sense than Marlowe writing it, because Philip Sidney's a grown man who has
access to the best teachers, the best literary education, that we've already shown the logistics about why the feasibility just is so much more concrete than some of these other candidates.
Another thing that I don't think people are totally realizing about Sidney is that, like, the influence of Leicester himself. Like, so much of the stuff Sidney writes is because of Leicester. It's because of his uncle. He's writing it for his uncle. All the masks that he writes for the Queen. He's not just like, oh, I love writing masks. Oh, the Queen, maybe I'll write one for her. No. It's because his uncle's like, the Queen's coming in 3 months. You need to write a mask. And Sidney's like, all right. I was like working on some poems about my girlfriend, and he's like, you're not going to marry her. It's not going to happen. Like, I hate you, Uncle Lester. He goes off and writes. But seriously, like, that's what's happening. And I want to tie this back to maybe Florio and Lily. While Lily is supposed to be totally writing for Oxford, and that's the understanding of his biography, what's not totally understood about Lily is when he starts writing for Oxford. And in spite of that known fact, whole bunch of people have suggested that Endymion, Lily's most famous play, is written for and about Leicester. Now, how to explain that, I'm not entirely sure, but honestly, a Leicester reading or a Sidney reading into Endymion makes as much or more sense than an Oxfordian reading, or as much or more sense than what the mainstream people say, that it's some Platonic abstract Renaissance motif theory. Like, I think Leicester makes absolutely by far the most sense. Now, what gets tricky is trying to figure out when and how to date that, and what kind of bibliographic sources do we have to verify that. That's where it's getting tricky, and people haven't gotten to it, but it's because people also haven't really gone far enough to consider that this isn't just Lily, this is a Sidney thing. And as soon as you do that, I think you're going to start to unlock it, and that's where I'm hoping to eventually get to. Haven't quite fully, but don't worry, like, maybe don't hold your breath, but stay tuned, you know. But beyond Lily, which Lily also in 1578 starts taking tutorials, and 1578 would be the year that he writes Euphues, which is his first novel. And some of the people that say that he wrote Endymion say he wrote it in maybe 79 or 80, so it'd be like right before that. Lily is getting tutorials from none other than John Florio. And that's supposedly John Florio's like first real paying gig as like a tutor, thinker, writer type dude. And he is tutoring his Oxford buddy, John Lilly. And so those two are buddies. But right at that same time is when John Florio is penning his first publication, which is, it's called a poetry collection. It's not really a poetry collection. It's almost like a weird, like, translation book of aphorisms. So, you know, like if you ever read Emerson, he's just got these like little 1 or 2 line little quips that sometimes they're like, you know, inspirational sayings. Sometimes they're just like observations that are somewhat witty. It's like the Renaissance version of that, and one line will be in English, one line will be in Italian, one line will be in English, and so it's like you get the Italian and English for each little aphorism, proverb type thing. And some of them are, you know, kind of neat, but it's like it's not really some mind-blowing poetry collection.
I always heard that it was put that it's more of like a translation sort of exercise or something, you know, like how to learn it. Like. Learn more Italian by sort of like reading this stuff. Not that it explicitly says that, but that sort of like implied in the way it's sort of structured, or that you.
My understanding of Florio is that he's not really living fully in England until he's 19, and so like, yeah, I'm sure he spoke English before then, but like, to have the ability to be John Florio, to invent the third most words in our language, like, how does that happen in 6 or 7 years? Because he comes to Italy at the age of 19, or sorry, England at the age of 19, which is like 1571, 72, and then he's putting out First Fruits in 1578, which is dedicated to Leicester. And I'll have a video on that dedication at some point, because it's the exact same language as Sidney's letter to the Queen.
Yeah, stuff about Leicester is a red flag, and a lot of this research too is fun. Yeah, seeing him pop up and crop up, but my god.
Just Florio, Sidney, Lily. There's so much going on in the early 80s, late 70s. Spencer. the whole university wits crowd. Marlowe's the last addition to that, so why the heck would we like pick his name? And I get it that people want to say he's the difference between the early and the later. That's where the Shakespearean spark comes from. But I think that's a little misguided. I think that's not a full understanding. I think that's swallowing way too much of what the Victorians said about Lilly. Apparently Victorian literary critics hated John Lilly. And so none of us know about John Lilly. You don't have John Lilly on your shelf. You got Marlowe. You don't have John Lilly. It's because of Victorian critics. Because they went out and said this dude didn't know how to write plays. He's super lesser. He's important because he's one of the first to like make it commercial and make it viable. But he's really just an idiot who's stuck in his little gimmicky style of the 80s, and he didn't know how to write. Which is about as far from the truth as it gets. These Victorians don't know their head from their you-know-what, and I don't know, I think history has shown that. Victorian literature, yeah, shots fired. Come tell me why I'm wrong, why freaking boring Jane Austen, Dickens are better than Shakespeare. You know what, save it. Don't tell me that. You won't like what I have to say. That said, we're almost done here, folks. We're almost done. Marlowe, Shakespeare, Lilly, all these folks, they're all great writers. They're all great writers. They all do different things to some extent in each play, and that's probably why we have different names on each one. If Lilly read just like Marlowe, it would say Marlowe. If Marlowe read just like Shakespeare, it'd say Shakespeare, vice versa. Lilly's a different exercise. It's an earlier exercise, and euphuism's probably the most influential thing in our modern English language, so like to heck with that. But yeah, Lilly, Sidney, those guys, we don't need Marlowe. We don't need Marlowe as the big progenitor of genius. There's all sorts of different kinds of genius. Marlowe is just the implementation of blank verse and the implementation of more subversive ideas.
Yeah.
But we eventually get all of it in Shakespeare. It's all in Shakespeare. Lilly's euphuistic antithesis and you know, real witty one-off comic subplots between two dunces. That's a Lilly thing. That's totally a Lilly thing. So going back to The Tempest, Stefano and Traculo, and that's Lilly. That's Lilly. We get the main plot, then boom, we get next scene, freaking subplot, and then main plot, and then maybe a little other thing, side thing with the main plot. Oh, back to those freaking idiots. Like, that's a Lilly thing. Marlowe doesn't do that. That's not a Marlowe thing. It's in Shakespeare. So, yeah, there we go. That's it. That's it, folks. That's what we got. Let us know how crazy or silly this sounds to you. Did Shakespeare get Marlowe killed? Is Shakespeare Shakespeare? Is Marlowe Marlowe? Should we come up with better terms if these people aren't even who we say they are? Anything and everything's open. That said, thanks for sticking around this long. Stay tuned for some future videos. Going to come at you hard with some Lilly. May take a day, may take a week, a month, maybe even a year. But I will have all sorts of Lilly,
tomorrow,
Sidney, and maybe even Florio analysis all tied into a big video to show us that we should probably consider at least Sidney's influence on those two, if not the possibility that he is helping pen those, if not the possibility that he is actually just the author. But that said, we also need to go back to group theory. We kind of need your help for that, guys. It's hard to just jump into something that, you know, we've been going down this Sidney rabbit hole. It's hard just to jump, you know, headfirst into a Bacon thing. Where do we need to look? Where do we need to go? I think we're pretty well versed on Oxfordian stuff, but if there's other stuff you think we're overlooking, shout it out. You Florians, Brady's got Yates's Florio biography. We're neck deep in that. I went and read First Fruits. Gonna read Montaigne at some point. Gonna go down that road. But yeah, you guys that are like, hey, what about this guy? Tell us what we need to look into. At some point, still gonna pick up Raleigh's History of the World, some other stuff like that. But yeah, that about it?
I think so.
All right, sign us out.
All right, guys. As always, read your stuff, have fun reading, and nullius in verba.